Welcome, world. We are representatives of Filmgate. We're really excited to kind of talk a little bit about who we are and then maybe do a fun movie review of Dunkirk behind us, as you can see. So first off, I'm Jeff Simon, Professor Simon. I'm advisor at Filmgate, and we've got Seth and Jared here. What actually is Filmgate? Who are you personally? And then who is Filmgate as an organization?
Yeah, so we're basically just a group of students that are passionate about making film and understanding film at a deeper level in order to create films that will glorify God. And so that's pretty much what our goal is to make films that glorify God. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you're going to be making films, maybe what are some of the projects that you're working on this year or things like that?
Yeah, this semester specifically, we're starting into having our new people who joined starting with their own film projects. So we're breaking off into 3 groups, and they're each learning how to create scripts, learning how to direct, learning how to do camera. And at the end of the semester, we're hopefully going to have all those films done so they can look back and they'll learn, which will prepare us for our bigger venture. Through this whole year, we're going to create a Christian film that we're going to take to a Christian film conference.
Yeah.
So that'll be our big goal for the year. For sure.
And if we win big, that's the icing on the cake. So.
Right.
So,
Right.
mad props. So, great, you got a little bit of overview. I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about us, but before we switch into review mode, when are your meetings and who actually can be involved in Filmgate? Do you have to be like a screenwriter, camera person? Mm-hmm. What type of people do you work with, and when can they maybe meet up with Filmgate?
Yeah, so our meetings are Monday, 7 to 8 in Apple 115. Really, anybody who's curious about the whole film process and wants to be a part of that can be involved. So we're looking for writers, we're looking for artists, we're looking for actors, we're looking for people like camera, people who like doing more technical things, behind the scenes, editing, visual effects. Like really, honestly, if you're even curious about film, we can find something for you to do. Yeah, there's just so much to be done and so much fun to be had. So come to Filmgate. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, okay, switching gears here.
All
So basically, one of the things that we were excited to do and try out, obviously the new studio that we're sitting in is a great place to be, but we wanted to kind of take a film from the summer that was a major blockbuster from a tried and true director that had a little bit of a different, I think twist and reaction than a lot of his previous work.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about Dunkirk, and I don't know, we're going to like paper, rock, scissors, or draw straws. Who wants to go first?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, I guess.
Okay, so what's Dunkirk? What is Dunkirk?
What is Dunkirk? All right. Well, so Dunkirk.
Where is Dunkirk?
Where is? Great question. So Dunkirk
It's not in England.
It's not in England. Nope. It's actually in France. It was basically when Hitler did his blitzkrieg through France and basically took over France. There was a huge evacuation where all of the French and British soldiers were pushed to the ocean by the English Channel and had to evacuate. And basically, they were bombing them, and they weren't able to bring their ships in order to get them out. And that's kind of like the premise of the movie. And the movie, yeah, you have to understand that for us, it's almost like they're Pearl Harbor. So they don't really need any historical context to understand it. But for us, we may not understand where the British are actually coming from this film. And so,
yeah, that was one of my main takeaways. That was I prepared myself to see the film, and that's not a normal step I take going to see a movie. I want to go and be entertained and have a self-contained story, or be part of some series I'm already watching. But this one was something where I actually read up on history to be able to appreciate the film. So I want to hear from you, Seth. So I'm on IMDb, and it says that the tagline for the film is, "At the point of crisis, at the point of annihilation, survival is victory." Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that was captured in your experience viewing the film, and maybe what even that meant to you?
Yeah, a lot of this movie was a lot different. Like you said, the movie was created not to really focus on the characters. You get their names, you don't really get their backgrounds like some of the other movies like Saving Private Ryan. Yeah. And it focuses on the story itself. So like you said, you kind of have to know what you're going into. You have to know the background behind the story to really get the best out of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's a key. He focuses on the realism of it. You have the dogfights. There's not many big Hollywood effects in it. There's no big explosions. There's no fireballs.
Well, there are those.
There are a few.
There are,
but it's not like Michael Bay where he takes the ocean and evaporates it for effect or something.
Exactly. When the planes get shot down, it's more realistic. They slowly fall into the water. There's just no excessive explosions and excessive violence, which also comes out of its PG-13 rating, which I think is a big part of it.
Yeah, that was something that I thought was interesting. I'm not sure. So I think the intention of the film was to create an experience and not so much tell a story. At least everything I've heard from Christopher Nolan on his interviews. But and that kind of threw me off when it was a PG-13 rating, because I mean, like, there's like very visceral scenes with like people who get like bombed and people who get shot. But like I didn't see one drop of blood throughout the entire film, which I'm not sure is a positive for like the artistic aspect of it. I think I understand why he did it, because it was released in the summer and people see movies less in the summer, and so in order to appeal to a wider audience, went a little bit less on the graphics. But I don't know artistically if that was actually a good choice, because it kind of, for me at least, it removed me from it, because like when you see someone get like bombed, you expect to kind of like, you know, I don't know.
So one thing I was thinking about after the fact of seeing the movie is, alongside of that, like no blood, no real blood. There might have been a little bit, or
But,
you know,
yeah.
whatever, but nothing like a typical war movie or something like Saving Private Ryan, where it's very graphic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I left, there was two things. One, everybody that was with me said that was loud. Like,
Yeah.
that's like,
Yeah.
you leave, you're like, man, that was a loud movie. But I think more of the cringe factor was the bombings and the plane screeching by, and I wasn't affected much by the actual violence. And as I thought about it, the people on the beach, that's how they are. Like, you're actually feeling like they did.
Oh, yeah.
So if they're seeing all this carnage, they've kind of been whitewashed against it, and the only thing they're listening for is the danger. And so I felt like, as far as that experience,
Right.
that I might not have felt like I was there, but maybe that is something that he was capturing via interviews or something, saying, you know, all the gore and violence at that point didn't matter. It was more about the survival, the fear, and being aware of anything.
The
So
subjective
that's me kind of
experience.
being devil's advocate there for your position. But
Right, yeah.
But I think that that was something interesting that I thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no wow factor. It was like you just see just how they had no hope. They were getting bombed. They were getting destroyed. Every time a boat went out, it got destroyed. Every time they were in a plane fight, and I mean, most of the times they didn't do so well. It's just constant barrages of bullets and death, and just
Right.
there was no wow. This is like they're just like bombings everywhere. It was just constant depression. Like
Yeah.
you really felt that.
But again, I think that same thing, just that feeling of, you know, if you were there, you don't feel like a hero. You just have to do it. You don't really have a lot of choice.
Right.
And we're sitting there watching through this movie where you feel like you're just sitting there watching them getting thwarted over and over again. And finally, some of them make it out. And even at the end, he's got like this little like flotilla of boats or something. But when you read about it, like there were thousands of them. But it's just showing that little bit of, you know, push at the end from the civilians and things like that meant so much to everyone there that it was just astounding. And again, like it ended up saving basically probably the war. Like as you read history,
honestly.
it doesn't really feel like that at the end of the movie. But I don't think those soldiers felt like that. I felt like they felt like, okay, we got off of France. Now we're going to have to do this again in England. And it didn't end up that way because so many people were saved. But at that point, they didn't know that. And I think they were just thinking, well, this is just one boat to more carnage. And I feel like that's the way that the movie kind of ends. It's so a lot of the soundtrack is very minimalistic, if I remember correctly. It wasn't like big and booming. Everything was about the actual atmosphere of the beach, the waves, and the engines and the planes. Like I felt like that like drove the film. And so as they're kind of going away, there's no epic, you know, John Williams score driving them home and to victory. Their victory was that they just got out.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting. So that was a really interesting thing for me. So flipping gears, have either of you looked into like the production process that he went through? I saw it in IMAX.
Yeah.
Definitely was worth it. But I don't want to give all of that away. What's some of the things that you thought of as far as like, did you see it in IMAX? Did you like it? Why? Why was it important to see it in an IMAX or anything like that?
I saw an XD. I wasn't able to get to an IMAX theater, so I got as close as I could. But I know, like, looking behind the scenes and looking at some of Christopher Nolan's interviews, he was talking about the kind of boats that they used and how, like, the boats actually weren't exactly the historical replicas that he wanted, but, like, he got as close as he could with the money that he had. But, like, there were real ships sinking in that film, and, like, those were, like, real practical effects, which is, like, classic Christopher Nolan, where, like, he hates visual effects artists. Sorry, Seth, but and it's just like But he loves the visual effects. He loves putting the actors in the moment, and he feels you get a much more raw experience. And I think the coolest thing about IMAX that's different from the Cinema XD is the aspect ratio. So the aspect ratio for IMAX is more like a square, but it's like just as wide. So you have like more on the top and bottom, but for the XD, it's just mainly widescreen. And kind of getting that, like, the way a cinematographer will frame a shot will be completely different if they have that much room on top and bottom to work with. And it's just a completely different experience. Yeah, I don't know. So see it in IMAX if you can.
Yeah, I'm going to go along with that. Most of what I saw was the same stuff. It was a lot of practical effects. There was not much VFX there. It was all real boats, a lot of even real planes, real stuff like that I think really made the movie realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so same thing for me. I definitely love my post and my VFX work. Yeah, that's what I teach a lot. But one of the articles that stuck out to me was from Variety. I'm just reading the title here. Christopher Nolan on Dunkirk. There was no green screen. And when I'm watching the movie, I don't think about it. I just take it for granted that these were probably CG explosions and ships. And I read the article and I'm like, oh my goodness, they actually like had ships that sunk, like you said. And that for me, again, like I want to go back and watch it now and just experience that knowing that was occurring.
Right.
Where I didn't appreciate it as much on the first viewing. And so
we've like, well, I'll watch like Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And we saw like cities get leveled.
Yeah,
and,
but,
like,
but there's, and I think that some of the reviews I read were commenting on like that there weren't visually 300,000 people on the beach or thousands of ships. And this makes more sense to me now is that he's actually taking the realistic thing, taking a small chunk segment of the beach, showing what it was like, but very, very realistic. And that made me appreciate it more than like the haters out there that were like, you know, there wasn't enough destruction. And I'm like, you know, this is what it is. So as far as characters and acting, maybe like switching gears a little bit, I think really early on it was Seth that mentioned, you know, we kind of get the characters' names. I was trying to remember any of the character names.
One was named George.
Even like at the end of the movie, that was it. George was like the only one you can remember. And there's lots of people you walk through. One of the main characters doesn't speak almost the entire film, not to give any super spoilers away, but you just kind of work through that, and it's just, again, I think part of that experience of these are faces that you'll see today and maybe never see again. They could die. The relationships are different, and it's that feeling that I think he's trying to give out. Also, one of the things we didn't really talk about was the editing and pacing of the film.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about how that works, if you remember.
Yeah, it was classic Christopher Nolan editing. Yeah. So if you saw like The Prestige or Memento and like how he kind of just messes with you a little bit, it was reminiscent of that. He kind of did like parallels. So there was 3 like evacuation points. It was the mole, the sea, and then the air. And so he would kind of like intercut. He cut it based on like an event overlap, and so not necessarily chronologically, but where these 3 events came together, he would edit that event, and then he would go to the next event. And sometimes you actually cut backwards and and then restart that event that we already saw earlier, and then it was. It was bizarre, but I think it worked how he kind of like used those parallels between similarities. Like there'd be like a burning boat in the water, and they would cut around that scene where the mole saw the burning boat, where the air saw the burning boat, and where the people on the other boat saw the burning boat, and we'd cut all of that, and then he would go on to something else. And so I thought that was a really creative point, and it kind of created like a. I don't know. It just created like an interesting effect that I can't have.
Yeah, I don't know how to categorize how I felt. It took me about 20 minutes in, I realized this was starting to happen.
Right.
And I didn't know ahead of time that was going to be the way that the timeline was told. So it kind of threw me off at first, but I was able to get into it. So.
Yeah. And the music again, we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer, classic. He using his I don't know if you saw in Interstellar, there was a scene when they were on the water planet. And they're trying to get out, and they're running out of time, and you hear and you're like freaking out because they're like losing like their entire lives on this freaking planet that they like spent 2 hours on, and it's like, sorry for spoilers.
It's been out long enough.
Yeah, for real. But he brought some of that back on the beach, how like time was coming, and the Nazis were coming in with their planes and bombing the beach instead of like bringing up whole troops and risking their own casualties. They just picked them up from the air. And so that whole thing. And then another thing they did was something called a shepherd's tone. Did you hear about that at all?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that? Or
I don't know. If you want to, you can.
I'll talk about it.
Maybe Seth can give his
feedback on it or something like that. All right, sure, yeah. So shepherd's tone is really simple. Well, it's not simple, but there's basically one tone that's like held, and then there's a scale that starts from that tone that goes up, and a scale it starts with that goes down, and it kind of has an effect like a barbershop kind of thing. I don't remember what you call those, but they just kind of it's like an endless spiral. Yeah, it's an endless spiral up, and it's constantly building tension, and you can't explain why. But like you're like constantly on edge, and it constantly looks like it's about to arrive somewhere without ever arriving.
Yeah, it's like the happy quartet ending, but like on a minor scale that just disturbs you.
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of what it's doing.
Right.
And again, I don't know if everybody even picked that out that that's happening.
No, I don't.
You just feel it. It just again, it's part of the whole experience and feeling that I think, you know, story-wise, it's not really a story. It's just like an experience, like you said. I don't think it's going to win like best screenplay. But as far as like editing and the experience, I feel like all the planning that went into every aspect of the production was very, very purposeful. And that's something that I know we talk about in like classes or in our Filmgate meetings. It's like when we're talking, it's like everything has a purpose. And the more you plan, the better you can produce, and then the better you can make it possibly in post. And so this is one of those prime examples, I think, where Christopher Nolan had his vision and worked with his team to make that vision reality from multiple fronts, converging on one location, the audience, just like convergence in that one location of Dunkirk, and then they got away. And the audience escapes too, so we all made it out to tell the tale. But
So the question is, should we see it? Should people who haven't
I'm
seen
gonna
it
say,
see it? Should people who haven't seen it go watch this movie then?
I definitely think it's worth. I think any Christopher Nolan movie that gets released, you should go see, just because I think he is like the equivalent of Hitchcock of our time or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's pushing the medium forward, even though when people thought like all of film theory has been developed, he's using shots like, oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that. Like as the boats are sinking, you have water coming in like 90 degrees like that, and so
cutting the frame.
Right. Like he completely turns the camera sideways, and he messes with the reality to put you in the perspective of going down on a ship as a sailor.
Yeah, you don't know which way is up.
Yeah,
How do I get out?
Yeah, you're just drowning, and it was tragically beautiful. I don't want to say beautiful.
Okay, so you say yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I say yes, definitely.
You say yes. I say if you are a casual film goer that just goes to be simply entertained, you may not enjoy this movie. But if you're someone who likes film and is appreciative of the work, the accuracy, more or less, and the production value, then definitely yes for me. I would say, I can, just because of my longer life experience, my wife would not like this film. She would be out 20 minutes in, and they start cutting back and forth, and she's like, I'm lost, and I don't care about any of these people. You know, like, I mean, she does, you know, I can say that, like, you do, but not individually. And so I don't think it's for everyone, but I think if it's for someone who is willing to invest critically in it, then definitely worth the investment.
Right. Well, thanks for listening. I guess this is the end.
Yeah, we didn't really think about how to close, so Filmgate out.
Yeah.
Iris down.